if our body language is not in a nice professional way, that I will ask that to be changed. We will expect that that be changed. And if it not be changed, we'll take a break in the meeting, give everyone the opportunity to come back together again in a good, healthy way. If it doesn't change again, I will ask personally a person to leave if it is to the level that it is so disruptive for the board to do the work. Ask individually a person to leave, and if that doesn't, if that does not satisfy, then the officer here will help us take care of the situation. So you would be asked to leave with the assistance of the officer. And I'm hoping that we don't have to do that. I'm hoping that we all do our work in a very, very good way. What we are going to be doing soon is starting our meeting, and we have an executive committee session that we need to take care of at the beginning of our agenda. And to do that, all the audience participants will need to please exit the room. That is a closed meeting. And when we are done with that executive session, the doors will open. You'll know that you can come back in here. So right now, I would like to see if there is a motion for approval of the agenda. Jim?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda with one alteration. I'd like to move item 4 to happen before board reports, so after our business section.
Is there a second?
Madam President, there's also an HR addendum.
How about the HR addendum, Jim? Would you like to add that in?
Pardon?
HR addendum.
Yeah, plus the addition of an HR addendum under 7B.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second for that? Tracy?
Second.
Tracy? Okay, there's a motion and a second for moving the item number 4 down. Jim, you said it goes past when?
After business.
After business, okay? So that would be before board reports.
Correct.
All in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Motion, all against, anyone against? Okay, motion passes. So that takes us through the approval of the agenda. Again, on to number 3. Is there a motion? Jim?
Yeah, I'd like to move us into executive session for the purpose of consultation with our attorney under North Dakota Century Code 44-04-19.1 and 44-04-19.2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Jim and a second by Brian to move into executive session. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. It is 5:35 p.m. We will clear the room. The individuals that are able to stay in the room for executive session by law, by Century Code, the board members that are here, we have Dan Gosted from an attorney here that is joining us, Missy Eidsness, Dr. Gross, Rupak, Dr. Gandhi, Doug Andring, Jackie Gapp, Jolynn Mathern is in the room, and Anne Marie Campbell. I believe that everyone else would need to please exit. Thank you. p.m. And we're at the part of the agenda where we have recognition of audience. There are 12 individuals that have signed up to speak to us or with us this evening. It looks like everyone is, just looking at the address, it looks like they're all Fargo addresses or Fargo school district addresses. So everyone that is signed up, I will call in the order that they signed up. We were working on making sure that we heard from people that live within the city, well, within the Fargo School District and the city of Fargo, in case people from outside of the area were here to speak. So I'll end up calling you up by the order that you signed up. And reading a few of the guidelines here ahead of time, and I think some of it's on the screen behind me too. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and address for the record. Speakers must refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and we will listen carefully, but we are not obligated to respond or to debate issues in this forum. Should you desire a written response to a specific question, you may request it. This evening, with 12 speakers, we have allotted a maximum of 3 minutes per speaker. Upon conclusion of the allotted time, a chime will sound and you will be asked to conclude. If necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds after that, signifying the end of your time at the podium. And the first speaker this evening is Melissa, I believe it's Bursted. I don't know, or Bunstead. I will apologize ahead of time in case I mispronounce many names here, so please feel free to correct me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm assuming that was me, and my name is Melissa Birkland. I live at 415 8th Street South. Dear school board members and Fargo Public Schools, thank you very much for your service, particularly during an incredibly challenging year. Thank you for making in-person instruction a priority and for taking great steps to make sure that all students could safely return to school. I respectfully request that you keep our current mitigation strategies in place. Please consider our successful return to school with low to non-existent transmission rates as a clear sign that masks work. This pandemic is not over, and it will not be over unless and until we reach a critical mass of vaccinated community members. We know that new COVID variants are more transmissible and more infectious, meaning that children can get and spread COVID. Children are more likely to be asymptomatic spreaders of COVID. And while children may smoothly recover, their own infections can spread to more vulnerable community members, and we could find ourselves once again with an overwhelmed healthcare system and a staggering death rate. As of today, less than 50% of North Dakotans under 50 years old are vaccinated. This means that a majority of caregivers for school-aged children are not protected from COVID. I firmly believe that distance learning is disastrous for single-parent families and families struggling financially, those with less of a safety net and for whom missed school could leave them forever behind. Masking helps protect kids not just from illness, but from a quarantine that would keep them out of a classroom. Masking is also most effective when it is not a choice, but a requirement, and when it is normalized and embraced. My husband specializes in the treatment of immunosuppressed children, and at the beginning of this pandemic, he explained to our own elementary school kids that there's a new virus in the world, one that no one's immune system has ever seen before. They understood that we need to wear masks to protect ourselves and to protect other people, including his immunosuppressed patients, from getting COVID. This pandemic has proven to me that the Dunning-Kruger effect is real. Those with the least amount of training in law and science are often the fastest to declare non-existent liberty interests and baselessly reject proven scientific theories. Please do not fall prey to this. Humbly acknowledge that you are fortunate to have an expert among you, and I implore you to listen to her. Dr. Tracy Newman's 4 years of medical school, followed by 3 years of rigorous and specialized training in pediatrics, and a master's degree in public health on top of all of this, means that she can analyze complex information and objectively and competently deliver professionally skilled advice to you on the best practices, as she has done this entire academic year. Until we are able to vaccinate all school-aged children, masks are the best strategy we have for protecting our children and in turn, our community. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kelly Turner.
Hi, my name is Kelly Turner. I live at 2807 Evergreen Road, North. I was frequently confused by the mixed messages coming from public health agencies. They seemed to consistently contradict each other. I was alarmed enough to actually do my own research from multiple sources, which has raised significant concerns both medically and legally of the current mask mandate which is in place. The New England Journal of Medicine states that forcing children to wear masks is ineffective, harmful, and unnecessary. These dangers are a major threat to their health and development. Not only are we depleting their oxygen levels, we are instilling fear, anxiety, shaming, and rejecting them by separating them in class, lunch, and recess if they cannot wear a mask. There are proven microbial challenges as well as breathing difficulties. In essence, a mask may very well put children at an increased risk of infection with a far worse outcome. These masks create a threatening and unsafe environment where emotional connections become difficult. During the Spanish flu epidemic, there is documented universal agreement among experts, including Anthony Fauci, that the vast majority of deaths resulted in bacterial pneumonia from the masks. So why on earth would they be re-implementing something this dangerous? Additionally, children have been shown not to be drivers of this contagion. The CDC shows that the K-12 survival rate is 99.997%. All parties mandating the use of masks are not only willfully ignoring established science, but are engaging in a whole school clinical experimental trial. The CDC also states that they found no reduction in viral transmission with the use of masks. Regardless of the lack of safety and efficacy behind the decision to require children to wear masks, it is illegal to mandate investigational therapies without informed consent according to the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations. Furthermore, by requiring children to wear a mask, you are promoting the idea that a mask can prevent a disease, which is an illegal deceptive practice. It is unlawful to advertise that a product can prevent disease unless you possess competent and reliable scientific evidence substantiating that the claims are true. The fact that masks present a severe risk of harm should never be required. Our children are innocent victims and have done nothing that would warrant an infringement on their physical, emotional, and constitutional rights. Misrepresenting the use of a mask as being intended for antimicrobial or antiviral protection and/or misrepresenting masks for use as infection prevention or reduction is a deceptive practice as per the Federal Trade Commission. Forcing children to wear a non-FDA approved medical product without the child's consent is illegal and it is immoral. In closing, I have to ask, what have we done to our children? The serious physical and emotional wounds that we have perpetrated on them is shameful. I will stand in the gap for each and every child and be their voice. Do we not fear the Lord? He will hold each one of us accountable for our actions and our decisions for harming His children. We must ask for His forgiveness, His guidance, and His wisdom moving forward. I am here to demand that the mask mandate expires immediately to protect these children.
Thank you, Kelly. The next speaker is Rita. And if you would be able to share your last name, pronounce it correctly for me, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rita Ludeman from Fargo, and I appreciate the opportunity to follow up on speaking to you a few weeks ago about my son. And I have to ask you this, are you listening? Are you listening? And forgive me if I'm emotional tonight, but I got a call from one of you after speaking. Do you know your jobs? It's to provide a free, appropriate education. And I gave you a testimony about a child being harmed and an environment being created. And I am a social worker, I'm a sociologist. So when I talk about what's going on in that area, I'm not just a fierce mama bear. I have some training behind me as well as to what is going on that's not just harming my son, it's harming all of the children in this school when an environment of fear and division is created. I left this meeting with a son who said, people care. I heard Mama say, I had tears in my eyes. I think somebody might be listening, Mom. And then I got to tell him your judgment. And we watched the news that night while you sat on Fargo grounds with many people unmasked, exerting your rights to freedom, selectively applying your own policies. And I took him to school the next day, fighting tears as he said, "No one cares, Mom. It's never going to change." And since then, every day it has been worse. He does not believe anyone cares. And I listened to your governance meeting. It was brought up that a child has a mask exemption. What a concern is that? And the discussion was about how do we track cases? How do we quarantine? No one paid attention to the student who's actually being harmed when there's a 0.02% of children in the schools who have COVID. You are not doing your jobs. Your job is to establish education. And I have been ignored when I've said, please, please, when you tell me the stories of other parents in fear, do not tell me that they are afraid for their elderly parents or family members with cancer. I have all of those. Do you wonder why I dare send my child to school without a mask? Because I've done my research. Hundreds of hours, tens of thousands of dollars with doctors. And with all due respect, Dr. Moon, you are not my doctor. And I have a right to choose my doctor and listen to their advice, as does everyone in this room. You are in violation of your role. It started as a personal advocacy issue for my son. Everyone who is many kind that I've spoken to have tried. They cannot violate the policies established that you never had a right to establish. In Tennessee, a precedent court case was ruled on, and it said the school board has no right to make health decisions on behalf of children. I have the case. I would like a response to it in writing. I have gone over your 34 or 37 duties. None of them give you the right to make healthcare decisions on behalf of me or anyone's children in this room. You are out of line when you think you can make those decisions, and you should get back to how do we create an environment that is safe, that's truly educating children, and is not creating a division and fear, because my son cannot learn in this environment, and neither can many other children. And I listened to many case studies as a professional and a concerned parent where kids are committing suicide as young as 9, and the words they said right before they did it were the same words I hear my son say. And you are all culpable for that. And today I'm not begging you. I am demanding you to look at your right and your authority and the limitations thereof and get back to educating our children. That's your job. Their health decisions are in our hands.
Thank you. Cassie Schmidt?
My name's Cassie Schmidt. I live at 109 Oxbow Drive in Oxbow, North Dakota. I am here tonight on behalf of our group, Let Parents Decide That. We are up to over 600 members now. I've got some questions for you guys, and I know that you can't answer, but I do want you to think about it. If you're hearing from people, from staff members, from parents that are potentially still afraid and still living in fear over this virus, I'm wondering why the Fargo Public School District has not made it a priority to make parents and staff members aware of the other mitigation strategies that we have spent millions of federal funds to put into place in the schools, such as air filtration ionization systems on the HVAC systems in all of the school buildings. We have installed UV water filtration systems on every main line going into the public schools. We've replaced drinking fountains with bottle fillers. We have put into place electrostatic disinfectant sprayer systems to make sure that surfaces are disinfected. And I'm just really wondering why parents and staff are not made aware of these measures so that they can start to weigh their own risk tolerance when it comes to whether or not masks are needed by them. When we have a 99.986%, you're going to keep hearing that, 99.986% survival rate in North Dakota, higher for children, it becomes something that people should quite frankly be able to judge their own risk level on, okay? Now also, I believe, quite frankly, that this board has been taking liberties with parental rights when it comes to requirements versus recommendations. If you all believe so strongly in the recommendations, then it seems that you would be taking those recommendations into account in your own personal lives which we know not to be the case all the time. If you are only participating when it is required, that is very clear that you don't believe in the recommendations. If you're only using them when they're required, you don't believe that these masks that have a liability disclaimer on the back of them are working. You don't believe that your box of masks that is sitting on the table outside, that when I looked up says that it does not comply with FDA or NIOSH standards. You don't believe in those. You're doing it because it's a rule, and quite frankly, these rules have been an overstep. So I'm demanding that you all use your best judgment, dig into your hearts tonight, and please remember that you were not elected to make medical decisions for these children. You were elected to provide education and to take care of the financial side of that. So please keep that in mind.
Thank you. Nikki Holdsworth.
Everyone's a little ways away, so I'm going to take this off. And I am a rule follower. I'm an oldest child. My name is Nikki Holdsworth. I live at 2667 Golden Valley Parkway South in Fargo. I have 3 children in the Fargo public school system, and I'm an occupational therapist. I've worked in healthcare for over 20 years. I have a special love for the brain and helping people recover after injury. And my big concern is psychological impact of the pandemic on children and the current politics that are muddying the choices that we're making, including government funding for keeping masks in place versus following the needs of the children in front of us. I don't think we're gonna fully appreciate the impact of what we're doing for years to come. We are highly visually dominant beings. Like 80 to 90% of our processing is visual information. We are constantly taking in visual information. And when you occlude that really important part of the face, you are missing so much information. And kids also are, there is interest that happens, right? When you see facial expression, and that loss of that changes engagement. Don't think that it's not, and for years to come. There's a research article in Nature from the 21st of December in 2020, and it talks about the COVID-19 pandemic. The masks are the way that masks the way that people perceive faces. So the current study provides novel evidence for quantitative and qualitative changes in the processing of masked faces. These changes in performance, together with alterations along the processing style of partially covered faces, could have significant effects on activities of daily living, including social interactions such as education. Previous research already indicated that reduced face perception abilities following things such as age-related macular degeneration is accompanied by negative consequences of social disengagement and a decrease in the level of social confidence and a general decrease in quality of life. There are social and psychological implications to masking. There's more that's happening here. I have a friend that has hockey students, or hockey kids, and she said with the face masks, they're seeing a lot more injuries that are occurring because it's occluding some of the visual field. Like, there are things that are going on here. I have an 18-year-old who talked this year about committing suicide. He's been a really steady kid. I never expected to see any of these things. We had a lot of, for the first 3 months when we didn't know what was going on and we didn't know what to expect, we kept them at home. They didn't go anyplace. And then when they were able, I can't say how grateful they were all to get back to school, but I had trouble getting him going. Like, there was a morning he wouldn't even get out of bed. He did not want to go. He did not want to wear the face mask. He did not want to engage in school in this way. And I had to call my husband, who was already at work, to come home and to get him out of bed. I changed my work schedule so that every morning, I still am doing it, that I can look him in the face. I can look in his eyes, and I can be with him, and I can accompany him to school. This is a big deal. I have a 15-year-old who is just the greatest kid, and she is so motivated and has always been on top of things. She is totally burnt out. She said, "Mom, I feel lazy and depressed. My motivation is gone. I just don't know how to get it back."
Thank you for your comments. Out of the respect for the others that have signed up to speak with us this evening, we'll ask you to conclude. Feel free to follow up with us more later if you would like. The next person that has signed up is Chris Anderson.
Hi there, my name is Chris Anderson, and I live at 2602 34th Avenue South. My wife and I have 4 kids in the Fargo Public School system. We're here tonight because during COVID-19, there's been a value placed on masks by a small group of people in leadership. I'm here to tell you that the world has been told about the current situation. It's not reality. The amount of disinformation and lack of common sense in America is absolutely off the scales. We have a government that's been infiltrated by corruption to the point that's beyond any recognition of its original intent. Major news media platforms that have been lying to you and programming the public for decades. COVID-19, it was a virus created to be used basically as a bioweapon against the world, to crash economies, create fear, affect the outcome of a 2020 election, and to drive distance between relationships of families and communities. Dr. Rainer Fulmich is a world-renowned international trial attorney. In a statement that he made recently, he and his team of over 1,000 lawyers and 10,000 medical experts have compiled and collected undeniable evidence that the COVID-19 pandemic was in fact a planned criminal operation and has begun legal proceedings against the CDC, the WHO, and the Davos Group. If you look at it, the big picture, this whole agenda was really not about a virus. It's about world control and population control. People wear masks because they think they work. This is far from the truth. People that wear masks are either complacent, uninformed, or afraid. This is an absolute horrible way to live and not what we want to communicate to our kids. I believe one of the biggest reasons masks have been enforced is to instill fear. If a person or a child is overcome with fear, it's due to the fact that the truth has been hidden from them. I do not fear the times that we are in one bit because I know the truth. I encourage you to stop living in fear. The root of fear are lies. Fear doesn't come from God. We need to rise up together, arm in arm, take back our country that was stolen from us, unify our cities and communities and neighborhoods, and come together and celebrate all that's been given to us by God. We are all living in unprecedented times, more than you know. This is my declaration to you. With leadership, there comes responsibility, and responsibility, there comes consequences, positive and negative. The decisions you make tonight will determine your future. You will live with this decision for the rest of your life, and you will either rise up to the victory or you will fall. You'll never be able to say, you didn't know, or no one told you, or I was just following orders. Ignorance doesn't stand up in a court of law, and it won't stand up either here. You'll either be the school board that decided to keep innocent children masked up, or you will be the board that will set Fargo's children free from tyranny and oppression. It's up to you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Nicole Larson.
Hi, good evening. I was here a few weeks ago. Nicole Larson, 1822 7th Street South. I have 3 kids in the Fargo Public School systems. I've just been in awe of the hypocrisy of some of the things I've seen, the stories I've heard, the pictures that are floating around, and I don't understand what's going on. I see pictures of the school, people working at the school together, even outside, without masks on, and in the school, sharing on Facebook. And I think that's like not the lesson that we want to teach our kids. So when I hear this, and I see these pictures, and I see these things, and I hear things from different people around here, your data, studies, experts, CDC, anything you have to say kind of goes out the window, and I think that harms us in the end. And I just beg you guys to stop the madness, and let's just be humans. We're so divided on this, I don't even know why we're discussing it. So I can't figure out what's going on. Either some people are so disconnected, or it's a political thing, or you just want us to pretend to follow the rules. I don't know if you've been to a recent high school outdoor track meet, or if you've been to down a high school hallway, high school gym class, a recent volleyball tournament at Fargo South High. I don't know if some people might be last to the party on this, and I think it's kind of embarrassing. So, you know, as a nurse of 25 years, also listening last meeting, the stab in the back to a parent that has a child with a disability, and I think even CDC would list reasons where somebody could have a reason for an American Disabilities Act, and I think to completely say that's not possible is insane. We're not all the same, we all have different issues. I mean, it's not a blanket thing you can say, but there are people out there that cannot handle the mask. And just to see the pictures and the different things and hear people saying things, but then not actually living it in their own lives, I don't want to teach my kids that. I don't want to live just to pretend to follow the rules. I mean, you know, and I don't have to name names, and I'm not going to. But that's not cool. I'm not going to just do something because somebody tells me to. And then I see them not doing the same thing. That's just not logical. And it sets a bad precedent. The okay for me but not for you has never been on the right side of history, and I want no part of that. And I think it's going to damage public health going forward when you say something but you do something different, and people can see it. It's a small town. People talk. So, I don't know. We need to stop the madness. And it's not the job of the child to make adults feel safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Mueller?
Hi, Amy Mueller. I have a first grader in Fargo at Washington. Just a few, not to reiterate stuff, but I've also seen a lot of stuff floating around on Facebook. And as our leaders, if you guys are not willing to follow the rules outside and you're preaching all these rules to the children and making them follow them, then I think you should be following them in your personal lives as well. But currently, in the state of North Dakota, there's 178 active COVID cases. That is a 0.001% chance, or percent of the population that has COVID. There also has been no mask mandate by our governor since January 18th of 2001, and no Fargo mask mandate since March 22nd of 2021. The state of emergency ended on April 30th, so why are schools still requiring masks? You go out in the community, the majority of people do not have masks on. So why are you forcing our children to wear it? My son has to wear a mask 7 hours a day, outside for recess, outside for gym, and he's learning to read in first grade. How well do you think that's going?
Thank you. The next person is Lindsay. Is it Arbach?
Hi, I'm Lindsay Arbach, and I'm the mother of an elementary student in North Fargo. I asked my son what happens at school when you sneeze in your mask, and he said, well, my mask gets wet. And I said, do you go and get a new one? No. So he's sitting in school with a snotty mask. I volunteered in his classroom this winter when their class went ice skating, and they were all wearing their masks the entire time outside ice skating. And what happens when you're wearing a mask outside when it's 20 degrees out, your mask is wet. All of the kids' masks were wet and frosted, and they went back inside and had to wear them wet for the rest of the day. This is keeping them healthy. This morning, he told me that he's not even allowed to pull his mask away from his face outside at recess during soccer to catch his breath. This is what's happening to our children. They're too scared to hold up their mask to take a breath and for just a few seconds, and they're too scared to tell somebody that their mask is wet. At the last meeting, Tracy Newman said something. Every major medical association in the county, including the CDC and my guiding AAP, all strongly encourage masks in schools. I'm part of the school's physicians that advise districts nationwide, and everyone is unanimous about that, end quote. This is not unanimous. There are several studies out there that show the exact opposite of what she said. I have a couple of here. April 22nd, 2021, an article in the New York Times. Tara Parker Pope cites several doctors and biologists who advise against universal mask wearing outdoors. Quality research in the leading journal Nature estimated the COVID-19 survival rate, I'm going to say it again, 99.995 in children and teens. The Atlantic's Derek Thompson wrote in January 2021 that we've known for months that young children are less susceptible to serious infection and less likely to transmit coronavirus. In April and May 2020, a Danish study of 6,024 people determined asymptomatic people, especially children, do not have a substantial role in coronavirus spread. We're asking you to remove the masking mandate effective immediately, letting parents choose what is best for their children. This is not a decision that others should be making for us. And that leads to the question, does this school board even have the ability to create a mandate such as this? And I know it was mentioned earlier, but just this week in Tennessee, in Williamson County, a case was made against the superintendent and the school board, and the judge ruled that school boards have no statutory authority to issue mask mandates in our schools. We, the parents, need to decide, and we will keep voicing until this change is made. Thank you.
Thank you. Dawn Barth. My name is Dawn Barth, and I reside in Fargo. As a parent, I've always done my best to protect my children. But when threats within the school challenge those sense of security and trust and safety, we have to question why. Teachers can build a child up or tear them down. Their every word and every action has an impact on children. When those impacts are negative, they affect everyone. No matter the reputation of an individual, their actions speak for themselves. What I'm referring to is the case with ex-teacher Jack Ron. I was infuriated when I read the news article about his resignation and his disturbing pattern of conduct, mainly disgusted because my child was a victim. 6 years ago, he crossed the line, yet was allowed to continue teaching and have more victims. 6 years. And it's affected my child's self-esteem and his mental health, his sense of trust, hypervigilance in the classroom. How many more students were victims of him but never came forward? How many children are dealing with trauma because of him? How many incidences could have been prevented? 6 years. That's over 1,000 school days and probably close to that same number of students he had in his class over that time. That's not to mention any of the students prior to 2015. How long was it happening prior to 2015? Our voices matter, our children's voices matter, and their challenges are real. Stop punishing children for adult failures. So much of their future is in your hands. Mr. Ron's lengthy reign of inappropriate conduct and inappropriate contact with students sickens me to the core. It makes me hard to trust anyone. Trust is a dangerous thing to give away, and it's even harder to earn back. The trauma for my child doesn't ever end. He's suffered enough. You know his story. Time to change the narrative. Let's change the school climate and build children up. Stop tearing down the youth of today. Don't let this continue one more day. It's not okay. Not one more child. Thank you. Thank you. Jesse Van Dyke.
Just come on up.
Hello, my name is Jessie Van Dyke. I live in Fargo, 410 14th Avenue South. I wanted to quote something that Tracy said in our last meeting, which was that there is no risk of wearing a mask during physical activity, which is completely false. There are reports of children not only passing out, but actually dying from wearing masks in gym class during school. And just in our neighboring state, Minnesota, there are Facebook groups of hundreds of parents reporting their children have headaches, lightheadedness, they're passing out after sports practice, they have asthma attacks, etc. There was a study in Germany that was published in a world-leading medical research publishing paper. There were 26,000 children, nearly 25,930. 24 health issues were reported with these kids, which included irritability, headache, difficulty concentrating, less happiness, reluctance to go to school, malaise, impaired learning, and drowsiness and fatigue. My children have experienced more than half of these. Actually, we have a kindergartner who puts up a fight multiple times a week because of the mask that she needs to wear at school. It shouldn't even have to be a part of our morning, but it is. So I wanted to show this graph from the European Union. You'll see the black line is where masks were required, the red line is where they were not, and you'll see how much higher of a rate of COVID infections there were in the mask required countries. So that kind of speaks for itself. Lastly, I'd just like to say that suicide attempts and suicide in general in children over the last year have more than doubled. And it's your job as our school board members and our job as parents to make sure that our kids are safe at school. And we need to bring back as much normal as we can, which includes removing the face mask today. Thank you.
Eric. I think it's safer for you to help us out, or help me out, please. Thank you.
My name's Eric Eisenlohr. I live at 1345 15th Street South. School board members, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. My wife Carrie is a paraeducator at Carl Ben Eielson School and has worked there for 9 years. I'm not here because she asked me to be. I'm here because I'm concerned with the working and learning environment at Carl Ben. Over the years, there's been countless times my wife has told me that she, along with other staff, have had to break up fights, was told to F off, been called a fat B or a effing B, or been told to shut the F up, been called stupid, and so on by students. Students have been caught vaping, kissing, and fighting in the bathrooms. It breaks my heart when she comes home from school and she's in tears because there's so many children that are out of control, and there seems to never be anything done about it. Last Friday, Carrie came home from work and told me that that a student had brought a gun to school. It was my understanding that the student threatened to use the gun on another student and his family. We cannot stop a kid from bringing a gun to school, and it is not the administration's fault that the student did so. For me, the tipping point was the fact that the student reported the gun and that the threats, and had heard the threats, and the principal never locked down the school. The principal chose to not notify the staff of the incident until after it was over. The message that was received was there was an incident and it had been resolved. I am aware of the school district's policy for crisis situations, and needless to say, am extremely disappointed that it was not followed. There was a report of a kid with a gun in the school, and teachers and staff were not notified immediately. If staff members were notified, they could have locked their doors to protect themselves and the other students. It is unacceptable that many of the staff had to hear about the incident from students. In this event, the gun happened to be a BB gun, but that was not known until the student and the gun were located. In my opinion, until the gun was secured, the staff should have been notified so they could lock their doors and follow their safety procedures. The icing on the cake was that the media was told there were no threats made and that there was never a threat to the people in the school. This, to me, is a lie. There was a threat made, and the threat period started when there was a report of a gun, and it ended when the gun was out of the student's possession, because that's when it was determined it was a BB gun. This is just many of the problems with the administration at this school, and yet another incident of the lackadaisical attitude of the principal. The staff have asked for help and support many times, and Many have given up asking because they don't have backing. Why is it acceptable for students to get in fights, swear, belittle staff, and then continue to be able to go to class? Students will swear and yell at teachers, get sent to the office, only to be back in class the next period. Sorry. There must be someone to back up the staff. Otherwise, the staff will stop trying. Many good teachers have left, and hopefully the school board can help ensure that the policies that are put in place are followed. Please help fix this school. The students, my wife, and her coworkers deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you. That includes the individuals that have signed up to speak to us tonight, so thank you very much. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you'd like, or also, of course, you can feel free to leave. Would board members like to take a break? It's 6 after 7. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. For sure back in 10, please. 12 p.m., we will resume the regular meeting. We're getting started with our meeting, please, everyone. Thank you very much. We're moving on to the report section of the agenda. The first report is the legislative recap. There's been a handout that's been passed around to board members and administration. Dr. Gandhi, would you like to start? And then Robin Nelson will be assisting.
Actually, I think Robin's going to start, and then I'll chime in at the end.
Okay. Thank you. I feared it'd be easier to have handouts because there's so much to cover. By the time that we report, Jackie Gapp has had a fabulous overview, and so has the North Dakota School Boards Association. So I supplied those here because there's no sense in being redundant. So half of my job is done for the evening. Thank you, Jackie. A little bit about our priorities. We had a legislative priority booklet, or pamphlet, I should say, and those would be the first two items in the packet that I gave you. And I tried to go through and list some of the bills that were attached to some of our priorities. It was a different year, clearly. COVID funds and COVID really muddied the conversation about per pupil funding, and Dr. Gandhi will talk a little bit about that, I expect. Some of the pieces that were successful, a lot of it came down to learning loss, and some of those are addressed there in the the ARP. Transportation was finally codified in House Bill 1027. The on-time funding was retained. And then the career workforce academies, it was hard to follow, but it ended up in an omnibus bill of House Bill 1015. They removed the cities that would be able to qualify for that funding. So we will continue to follow that, but that was promising. We were very thankful for that. The next piece after our legislative priorities, I just had a Senate Bill 2046, and this was about North Dakota PERS. And this one really snuck up on us. It didn't even come out of committee until the last couple days. And it was in the Government and Veterans Affairs Committee. This was a retirement bill to help the North Dakota PERS, which is the retirement system for public employees, to be solvent. And it initially started out with some cash infusion from the legislature. It was hog-housed and was turned into a bill to remove the defined benefit package and change it into a defined contribution. When it finally hit the floor, there were some people that weren't exactly happy with the hog house, is what I was told. So that did fail 12 to 35. A little bit of follow-up on that. I talked to Nick Archuleta this morning from North Dakota United. On June 8th, there is a national conference for public employees retirement system. It's virtual. I assume Jackie might be aware of that. Nick is going to send me the link, but I think that would be something that we benefit from participating in. And there was also a study. The last time North Dakota PERS was studied was, I think, back in 2011. So there is a study that was authorized by our legislature, so we'll keep an eye on that as well. The next pieces are from North Dakota School Boards Association and Jackie's wonderful overviews. As far as there are a couple bills that administration is going to have to navigate. There are some that are in a conflict with state and federal laws. So Rupak and his team will be working on a couple of those. There were just a few. We talked about 2046, and then Jackie's overviews, and really those are made open to the public, so I'm not even going to go through them because she's so nicely and much more succinctly worded them than I would if I continued to talk. So thank you for your work, Jackie. Also want to thank Jo Lynn. She was instrumental in pulling and coordinating this session, and the Governmental Affairs Committee as well. And I'll ask Rupak to talk a little bit about all of these ESSER dollars.
Sure. And before we go into ESSER dollars, just want to give the board an update that, like Robin said, there were a few bills that either we knew about or snuck up on us that will impact just the way we do business in the teaching and learning environment. One that most of you are aware of is the Youth Patriotic Society. Principals will have to allow any organization that qualifies as a Youth Patriotic Society an opportunity to come in during the day, during the first quarter or the first semester, and speak to the students. I think we've had extensive conversations around that as well, but that did get approved. I think one that kind of slipped under the radar because it was on House Bill 1388. North Dakota Century Code has always had a mandated ratio for counselors to students at the secondary level. They now also mandated a ratio, I believe it's 350 students to counselor at the elementary level. That was slipped into 1388, meaning that is going to impact us as a district, and we're going to have to take a look. I believe that starts the year after next, but as a district, we're going to have to make a plan on making sure that we are hiring more staff to fill that ratios in the areas where that's not something that we're doing as well. So that's important for the board to know. ESSER dollars. So 1388 is the primary education funding bill. As most of you know, conversation throughout legislative session has been around the 1 and the 1%, which we ultimately got. It was very difficult towards the end, specifically just because of some misinformation that came around ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 fundings. ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 are part of the American Rescue Plan. They're the federal funding that's provided to school districts, and because it went through legislative session first, many legislators thought that the district could use that and therefore didn't need the additional 1 and a 1. Senator Shabley did a great job towards the end to push the 1 and 1 through by explaining that ESSER funding is limited in scope in terms of what we can do, and specifically around coming back from COVID. The funding does not mandate that in order to receive the funding, districts must do something. That's absolutely not the case. So there's no purchasing requirements for the district, but there are requirements on what the district can purchase, and they have to address learning loss as a big piece as well. But in order to be able to provide for, or even be able to have the opportunity to consider, a compensation for our greatest asset, which is our human capital, that 1 and 1 needed to happen. So we were extremely glad that we were able to see that during legislative session as well. So there are ESSER 1 funds, which were given to us at the start of the COVID-1 pandemic. We brought that to the board. We talked about that. That was part of our Smart Restart plan. ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 will have their own requirements. Some of it will also require public input period. Missy's going to do an article around some opportunities. They'll be in the Journey and School Talk later this week. We'll also provide an opportunity for individuals via survey to provide feedback on some of the things that we are considering on how to utilize those funds to fall within the parameters of that. So more information to come on that, but that's a little bit of a snapshot on those two funding sources federally.
Anything additional to add, Robin?
No, I've talked the whole session, so now I think it's time that I quit talking, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. But
Any questions for Robin or Dr. Gandhi? Doesn't look like it.
I get a break. Thank you.
For now, you do. I'm sure you'll be welcome for questions at another time.
Sure.
The second item under reports is an FEA report. There's no one here from the FEA. Jennifer Mastrud mentioned to me that a representative would not be at this meeting. We will move on then to the superintendent's report. Dr. Gandhi.
We had the privilege of announcing our last award recipient for the year, which was our Administrator of the Year. That was awarded to Mr. Andy Dolan, who also is finishing up his last year as he will be retiring from Fargo Public Schools. Mr. Dolan has been at Fargo North for decades, and he has been instrumental in his leadership there, so just wanted to acknowledge him. If you have an opportunity to just share some words with him as well. He's had steadfast leadership there. We are excited about one of the assistant principals at Fargo North, Mr. Travis Christensen, that will become the next principal there as well, and looking forward to that. But that's just some exciting news that's happening in this district. I will share some information around kind of the FPS Smart Restart plan later when we get to the business items as well. But that's it for my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. On to the consent agenda. Is there a motion for approval? Robin.
I move approval of the consent agenda with the HR addendum.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. On to the business section of the agenda. Dr. Gandhi, you have your hand up.
Yes. Board President Knudsen, is it okay if I ask for a quick break for just a technical thing? We are, an individual that's going to join us for the business items is getting an automated response from the call-in number that's not accepting calls. So if we can just figure that out.
Yes, that's fine. Let's take a 5-minute break. On to item A, under business, we do have someone that is joining us on the phone this evening for item A and B under business. That's Brenton Niesemeyer. He is the epidemiologist with the North Dakota Department of Health, someone the district has been consulting with, and one of the individuals the district has been consulting with throughout the entire time of the formation of the Smart Restart Plan, and then also to receive guidance as far as how the district is to operate in the various levels as we have been working through the global pandemic. So want to know all of you that he is on the phone for questions if we have them as we're moving forward. Item A is the postponed motion from the April 27th meeting. It's memo 123. That memo has my name on it. That is a live motion that was, like I said, left from the April 27th meeting. So we are to conduct business on that motion. That, like I said, it's a live motion and it was seconded. So we have opportunity for discussion on that motion at this point. Is there any discussion? David?
Madam President, I think the motion, first of all, has to be amended because the date that is mentioned in the motion has passed. I'd like that to be amended to May 14th.
So you have a motion to amend the current motion with the date where it would say beginning May 14th. David?
Yes.
Is there a second to that amendment? I'll second. Nikki is seconding the amendment. All right. All in favor signify by saying yes. Yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that amendment would pass. So we are on, so the motion then reads beginning May 14th, 2021, masks will not be required at elementary playgrounds or during outside physical education activities at the middle or high school level. Robin?
I also have an amendment. My first amendment was to end the mask mandate outside tomorrow, but I'm very happy to accommodate your amendment. What I would like to do is amend this to say beginning May 14th, 2021, masks will not be required on elementary playgrounds or during outside, and I'm going to strike physical education activities at the middle or high school level, and then add students and staff considered a close contact from outdoor exposure to someone who tests positive for COVID-19 will not be prohibited from participating in educational and activity-related functions. However, the district reserves the rights to exclude groups of students when multiple cases exist.
Does someone maybe have their phone, their ringer on? Okay, Robin, continue.
Sure, and the reason I wrote this is I agree with David's original motion. I think we need some clarification on not excluding children if they are considered a close contact.
Okay, Anne Marie?
I can email it to you as well, Anne Marie.
Anne Marie, do you want to let us know when you have that down so that it can
I'm
be
good.
repeated to us?
Thank you. You need a second to go forward, but yes, thank you.
That's true. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, a second by Brian. I guess we could have discussion right now, but it would be good to have the motion, the amendment read to us again because there were quite a few details there. And so Anne Marie, please let us know when you're ready for that.
Yes, so what you would be discussing would be a motion that would first strike physical education out of the motion on the floor. So then the motion, and with some additions, so then the motion would read thus: beginning May 14th, 2021, masks will not be required on elementary playgrounds or during outside activities at the middle or high school level. Students and staff considered a close contact from outdoor exposure to someone who tests positive for COVID-19 will not be prohibited from participating in educational and activity-related functions. However, the district reserves the right to exclude groups of students when multiple cases exist.
All right, Tracy.
A clarifying question for administration. Do you need 3 days? I mean, do you need the time to wait till the 14th, or could something like this start tomorrow?
It can start tomorrow. I mean, to be honest, we would have already eliminated the mask usage So after the last board meeting, we follow guidance from Fargo Cass Public Health, and that's always kind of been the structure of governance throughout this thing. Fargo Cass Public Health told us after the last meeting that, hey, we can do away with that. And like I said at the last meeting, it's not about mass, it's about the contact tracing afterwards and the mass and mass exemption. After the last board meeting, we were notified by Fargo Cass Public Health that they would support not masking outside during recess and not doing the contact tracing for that piece. And actually, CDC updated their guidance on April 23rd regarding masks during recess time as well. So had this motion not been in existence, we would have already taken masks off at recess. But I didn't know after the last board meeting what was the role of the board and what was the role of administration, because until now it's been follow the guidance from Fargo Cass. So we could do this tomorrow. That's not a problem.
Jennifer and then David.
So I was just going to say, or ask a question, can we offer a friendly amendment and just change the date? Or just change it to, say, immediately? And would David have to do that?
Yeah.
But a
Right.
friendly amendment is just like, because the intention is,
I think we have to vote on, we have to undo the amendment.
Yeah, Anne Marie,
But I,
protocol?
You are currently discussing an amendment to a motion. There can be a secondary amendment to amendment, so you can have an amendment to amendment. So someone could make a motion to amend the date. Friendly amendments do not exist in Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, there can be a motion to amend the date. David?
The only reason I chose the 14th was due to consideration for the principals, so that they could contact their staff and they could contact parents. I have no problem with this starting tonight. I mean, right now, tomorrow's just fine. It does not have to be May 14th, it can be May 12th. So I would amend this, I would place a secondary amendment on this motion to change the date to May 12th.
Which is tomorrow's date. Is there a second to that date change?
Second.
Second by Brian. Robin?
procedural question, could I just include my entire amendment with the original date? And then we wouldn't have to do and undo and then redo?
Anne Marie?
We already are doing it because it's on the floor. Never mind.
Anne Marie, could you please give us guidance? Now, we've had a motion to have this effective the date tomorrow and a second.
I will need you to take a vote on changing the date from the 14th to the 12th. If that is successful, then you will be talking about Robin's amended motion with the date of May 12th.
And is this a voice vote?
We should be doing roll call votes.
Okay, did anyone else have a question before we vote? Jennifer?
Procedural question. Again, under Robert's Rules of Order, we could ask for permission to withdraw a motion. So perhaps that would help start fresh, less confusion, just a suggestion.
Does anyone have a problem with us voting on this date change? I don't see any hands signifying an issue for a date change that would be a conflict. So it looks like we could vote on that. Anne Marie?
Gullickson?
Yes.
Folden?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Brian Nelson?
Yes.
Robin Nelson?
Yes.
Newman?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Benson?
Yes.
President Knutson?
Yes, motion passes. So the effective date into this motion now is May 12th, which is tomorrow. Now we're back to Robin's amendment, and the only change to that was the May 12th deadline from the original date of May 3rd. Any discussion on that amendment?
Can we restate that, just so I can keep this all straight?
Sure. If Anne Marie would please restate it, that would be great.
Are you seeking a restate of the entire motion or just the beginning portion of the date change?
Robin, what would you prefer?
What we're voting on next.
Sure. You are discussing at this time amending the motion to read thus, beginning May 12th, 2021, masks will not be required on elementary playgrounds or during outside activities at the middle or high school level. Students and staff considered a close contact from outdoor exposure to someone who tests positive for COVID-19 will not be prohibited from participating in educational and activity-related functions. However, the district reserves the right to exclude groups of students when multiple cases exist. You're discussing this amendment. You're not voting to adopt it. You're just discussing this amendment. You'll vote on it, and then you'll be back to discussing that as a decision. Does that make sense?
Is there any other discussion regarding this amendment? Dr. Gandhi?
I appreciate the inclusion of the close contact piece at the Second Amendment. As I process this, I'm not sure, so is the second statement intended to be in correlation to the outside activities and the recess piece? Because right now we're following the mask to mask and unmask to unmask piece. So just, that would be a question for clarification, and then just another approach, and if the board wants to formalize it, that's completely fine as well. Until now, we haven't picked out one or two mitigation strategies in isolation and taken them to board vote. I think the process until now has just been, as we get updated guidance from administration, we just follow and implement those guidances, including things that we can lessen out. So you also have a commitment for me that if there's no action today, if there's no action on this motion and we just go back to the way things were, we will also email the principals tonight and say, hey, no longer recommendation from Fargo Pass Public Health. We don't need, no longer require masks for outdoor activities or for recess. So administration's already kind of going that route. If we are it's just a little bit of a governance question because we've had a plan and the plan has been to consult with them. And now they're saying we're okay with that, but the board is also going to vote on it. So I'm okay either way, but just want to get some structure.
Robin?
I don't care if it's lifting the mask mandate at recess or playground or school property. I do not think that we should require masks anywhere outside for any type of activity. The reason I worded it the way I did is I didn't want to totally undo the original motion out of respect for the person that made the motion.
Any other questions? No questions, Anne Marie? We will vote on this amendment now.
Holden? Johnson?
Yes.
Brian Nelson?
Yes.
Robin Nelson?
Yes.
Newman?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Benson?
Yes.
Gullickson?
Yes.
President Knudsen?
Yes, the amendment passes. Now we have to vote on the full motion. Does anyone need it to be restated? Jennifer? Did you want it restated?
May I ask one clarifying question? It doesn't exclude, we didn't forget anything, did we? When you say you would have done it anyway, and I just want to make sure we're being inclusive of everything outdoors.
Sure. So I will share, and I know Brenton's on the line too, but just from what I recollect from our conversation after the last board meeting, what he had said is that we just would not require students to wear masks outside during recess or during outdoor activities. And if a student tests positive, the school would not be responsible for that contact tracing in that situation. I think Fargo Cass would just work with that family to see if there's close contacts. But I believe that part of this recommendation, and I don't want to put words in Fargo Cass's mouth, was that recess, the dynamics are a little bit different. Kids are running around. They might not be there for that long period of time. So there just wouldn't be a contact tracing. We just would let kids go to recess. If a student tests positive, if Fargo Cass wants to contact the school like they do, then they can. But the school would not do anything during that piece.
Robin?
So I want to clarify it on that because I work very closely with this book, the Child Care and School Infectious Disease Inclusion Guidance. I would expect that we would notify the class that there is a positive COVID case, but we wouldn't have to exclude. And I was very careful that there's contact tracing and exclusion are exclusive, but they're clearly related. And so I think just like when somebody has, sorry, I'm going to use something like lice, we are required as a district and child care providers to let all the parents know there is a positive case, but we don't exclude them unless, of course, they have lice. And that's the only analogy I can bring up with to compare it to COVID. I think it's still our responsibility for infectious, contagious diseases to notify parents.
Dr. Gandhi. And then after that, I'm wondering if anyone else does have questions for Brenton since he's on the phone. Dr. Gandhi.
Correct. I don't argue with that process at all. I think prior to this conversation around recess and the CDC guidance changing, the reason that we had masks outside is because schools were contact tracing. And if they had said, with the mask-to-mask contact, that prevented a student from missing school. Unmasked contact meant that that student would then have to isolate as well if we're following that practice. If we no longer have to do that, that's not the case, but we would definitely notify and follow the notification processes that we have.
Does anyone have questions for Brenton since he's on the phone? Anyone have any other questions or any discussion regarding this motion before we vote? Jennifer, you had said you would like it read again. Anne Marie, would you please read it once more?
Beginning May 12th, 2021, masks will not be required on elementary playgrounds or during outside activities at the middle or high school level. Students and staff considered a close contact from outdoor exposure to someone who tests positive for COVID-19 will not be prohibited from participating in educational and activity-related functions. However, the district reserves the right to exclude groups of students when multiple cases exist.
Okay, and please call the roll. Anne Marie?
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson, Holden,
No.
President Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. On to item B, the Fargo Public Schools Smart Restart Plan, Memo 125. This comes to us from Dr. Gandhi. Dr. Gandhi, would you like to introduce this item?
Sure. As you've heard from many of our patrons today and just a lot of the feedback that we've received from constituents across the board, I think masking has become a very large conversation, and I'm glad that the board is taking that conversation on this evening. However, administration's perspective has always been it's never masking in isolation. Our Smart Restart Plan was about the masking and the quarantine requirements because we were trying to protect the instructional time for making sure that mask-to-mask close contacts is different how we provide that versus mask-to-mask unmasked to unmasked close contacts. Those students would be required to isolate according to the recommended practices. We have always said that our goal was to return to in-person instruction and to return to level 5, which was that new normal, and that we would follow the mitigation strategies recommended by Fargo Cass Public Health. It was our intention to bring to the board a conversation around suspending the Smart Restart Plan in its entirety. I have been trying to protect the board from not just getting in a conversation about masking, because if you're talking about masking, why are you not talking about the other mitigation strategies or other elements of the plan that include the way we do nutrition services, the way we do cleaning, all of those things, because you voted in its entirety on the plan. So it has always been my goal to say, who's owning this decision? Is it administration executing the plan, or is it the board picking and choosing kind of which mitigation strategies are part of the plan that they want to do? So with that being said, we are recommending, with the blessing from Fargo Cass Public Health, a suspension of the 2020-2021 Smart Restart Plan, which is all of the mitigation strategies, to the level that we can, returning to normal at the end of this school year, which would be an impact for summer school as well. From the guidance that we've received at Fargo Cass Public Health as of now, their intention would be that this is, applicable to the summer. There's some dynamics that Brenton may be able to speak about that are different. If there's a spike or something down the road, their recommendation might change for the fall. Because masking has become a bigger conversation, administration would also recommend that if we have to go back down that route to talk about masking again in the fall, that we bring that to the board, and then that's for the board to discuss and hopefully get you in touch with Fargo Cass Public Health directly, so you can kind of make that decision. So it was always our goal to bring this to the second meeting of May, possibly even allow the board an opportunity to work with Fargo Cass Public Health, but for two reasons. One, because the masking conversations become prevalent and there's individuals expecting us to have this conversation today. But then secondly, also because we don't want to risk maybe a board member trying to make a motion around masks that would exclude or leave confusing language about all the other mitigation practices or everything else that we're doing in our plan today. So we're just recommending suspending the plan effective June 7th, which is the recommendation or following the guidance or the support from Fargo Cass Public Health, and that's the recommendation in front of you today.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Brenton, is there any additional information that you'd like to share at this point?
Thank you for having me. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I just want to say that, with the, it is still best, and North Dakota Department of Health and our contact tracers will still be following the North Dakota Department of Health and CDC recommendations. With summer, we know that there are less kids in buildings, more opportunities to socially distance. You can hold classes outdoors. There's larger rooms available that may not have always been available. But we will still be doing contact tracing on our end. So we will still be contacting the families of positive cases and doing the contact tracing on that end and asking who they may have hung out with. And we still will be reaching out to those families or those children and letting them know about quarantine recommendations and isolation recommendations. That would just be coming from the North Dakota Department of Health versus working with the school to disseminate those letters. It would still be our recommendation that positive cases isolate for the 10 days from symptom onset, and that we would still convey our recommendations to quarantine based on last exposure and whether or not they test out or if they remain asymptomatic throughout the course of the time. So those recommendations would still be coming, and we would still be able to work with that student's family to determine any of those close contacts, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Brenton. And in order for us to move forward, I would entertain a motion. Jim?
Yeah, I'd like to move that the board approve suspending the Fargo Public Schools Smart Restart Plan for the 2021 school year effective June 7th of 2021.
Is there a second, Tracy?
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second to suspend the Fargo Public Schools Smart Restart Plan for the 2020-21 school year effective June 7th, 2021. We are at the point where we can have some discussion now. Jennifer?
May I offer an amendment, please, to the motion? I would move that we amend it to say the recommendation would be to end the use of the FPS Smart Restart Plan, including the mask mandates and quarantine requirements immediately, so that we're doing that sooner rather than later.
Okay, there's been a suggestion for an amendment to the motion. Is there a second to that?
Second.
There's been an amendment and a second to the motion. Any discussion on the amendment?
Rebecca, can I ask to clarify that amendment?
Yes,
please?
Jennifer, could you please read that again?
Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Please
Well,
do that.
could you do it in striking and adding words, please, so I can
Yes.
follow along?
So basically, I just replaced, so I said I move that we end, instead of suspend, the use of the FPS Smart Restart Plan, including mask mandates and quarantine requirements immediately.
Anne Marie, when you have that down, would you please read that back to us so we can make sure it's correct?
Including mask mandates, could you repeat that part again for me, Jennifer? Sorry.
Sure, including mask mandates and quarantine requirements immediately.
So I won't go through saying what's struck out and added, but, so you want it to be that the board approve ending the FPS Smart Restart Plan, including mask mandates and quarantine requirements immediately?
Correct.
Is it the Smart Restart Plan for the 2020-21 school year? Is that included in, was
Well,
that
would be
included in the amendment?
label
That
of
was
it.
there.
You know, so if you ended it, it would end, yes.
Does anyone have questions on this amendment? Discussion? Dr. Gandhi? And then Brian, did you have your hand up? Okay, Dr. Gandhi first, please.
Just a question to Jennifer. Only quarantine requirements, which is not isolation?
So in following what we were doing in the previous motion, and it sounded to me like if you're ending this, that's inclusive of isolation, and that would then be on Cass Public. So If the recommendation is that I also include that, I'm happy to do so.
Isolation is for someone that tests positive, quarantine for someone that's a close contact.
Right.
So just trying to know what the intent is
Right.
here, what you're trying to include.
Right.
I would say that Jennifer, or whoever makes an amendment has to, that's the person that has the intent. So to get guidance on it, but for the person that's going to make the amendment to come up with the language, even though it might be challenging, and of course you can ask for some guidance, but ultimately that the person making the amendment needs to come up with the language for.
May I make
Robin,
a suggestion? I don't think that you would have to include masking and quarantine because you're asking to totally lift the whole Smart Restart plan. So maybe you don't need that piece. It sounds like you want to emphasize, but I don't think it's necessary.
And it may not be, and since we're discussing it, I mean, I'm open to those suggestions as well, so.
I was thinking on a similar note that suspending the Smart Restart plan, because we'd be talking about it in its entirety, would take care of the masking and the other items that you talked about, because those details are built into the plan that we had approved previously. Brian?
Well, first, I just wanted to thank Dr. Gandhi for your explanation on why you're suspending it, that date and things. My question moving forward would be, would this particular plan be, it's suspended, so you're gonna keep it to look at another time, because there's gonna be, don't we have to have something for ESSER $3, and that there has to be public comment on a plan, and I just know a few things, but I don't know everything that you may know.
Dr.
Sure.
Gandhi?
Great question. So I think there's always a plan for a variety of things, right? We also have a long-range plan for teaching and learning. ESSER $3 or ESSER $2, we're going to have a plan on how we're spending those dollars and helping with the return to learn environment, and that is something that will need approval as well, and there's some guidelines around that. So this does not impact that at all. This motion is specifically around that Smart Restart plan that we were required to create by the state at the start of last year or when COVID started, and just suspending that. I mean, any other responsibilities or obligations that we have, we'll need to follow all the processes for that as well.
Brian?
So the state next year isn't making us write a plan as of now?
They might be tied to funds, which Jackie might be able to speak to, but I don't know of any plan that was like this, like your Smart Restart plan that you had to write, which was part of the governor's executive order.
Jackie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think what Brian's referring to is for the upcoming ESSER funding, there's requirement to post our return to learn plan and get public comment on it in order to get the funds. So they are not necessarily the same thing.
Does that take care of your question, Brian?
Well, yes.
It does? Okay. Robin?
I respect where the end versus suspend comes. Would there be anything to preclude the district from restarting the Smart Restart? Or would that, things might go downhill. And so I think you're choosing your words carefully, and I respect that. But we might be at a point where we have to reinstitute some of this, and I want that to be said.
Dr. Gandhi, and then Jennifer?
So I think this will hopefully answer Robin and Brian's piece as well. Even once we suspend the plan, the non-controversial mitigation strategies have been effective and we're able to replicate in a non-COVID environment. We will continue to do that. That's just good practice, right? We've all learned things that work and don't work, and those are probably components that will be part of our return to learn plan. If this motion is approved today, something that maybe does have controversy or rises to the level, like, for example, masking, because that's been the main mitigation conversation that we've had, we would bring that to the board. The conversation around end or suspend, to me, is moot because the plan was written for the 2020-2021 school year. If we have any other plan for any subsequent years or time after, then we would write that and bring that to the board independent of this plan.
Jennifer?
You just answered my question. Wouldn't it be an altogether new plan to begin with? So, thank you.
Tracy, and then I have a question for Brenton. Tracy, go ahead.
I do as well. I just wanted to seek the expertise of Fargo County Public Health on the current amendment on the floor. What would be the recommendations from Public Health about ending this restart plan immediately?
No, I think the better recommendation would be to wait for the summer, the original date. With summer, we are able to socially distance more, hold classes outdoors, larger rooms, which is a mitigation strategy. We may not think of it lightly, but it is something that we can do. We have done so well so far this year, and we have some end of the year school events such as graduation and outdoor, festivities that may be held for our students, and it would be a shame that some of them may be in isolation due to positive cases within their own household or themselves. I think it's better to be consistent, and we've done it so far this year. Just recently, the FDA authorized the vaccine for those kids 12 to 15. I believe our hospital systems are going to be starting that administration right away this week. So those families that do want the chance to be or the opportunity to be vaccinated, they will have that opportunity, but that won't happen until this week or even next week. And then I'd just like to point out that, other districts that have seen or have lifted their mask mandates, we have started to see some clusters in those schools of positive cases, and which makes them look back at whether or not they need to shut down classrooms, even though they've suspended their plan. So, lifting the mask mandate or suspending the plan when we're so close to the end of the year may have some unforeseen circumstances.
Tracy, does that take care of your question? Yes. All right, I had the same question for Brenton. Anyone else have questions? Nikki?
I had a question for Brenton, but I think that kind of touches on it. I know that there have been outbreaks in area schools where they are seeing rising numbers and had to shut down classrooms because of this. So I'm a little hesitant to completely do away with it if we can just get through the end of the school year. But maybe I'm alone. But that's my thought. We've been doing so well. Should we stay the course? I mean, it's 2 more weeks.
Jennifer?
Okay, so a lot of things are just thrown out, and we're just supposed to accept them as fact, but I guess I would like to know what school districts, because when I look at even Fargo and a spike, the largest spike was in November, and it was huge, and we haven't had anything since then, and we've been wearing masks. So there was a little spike after that, after spring break, people traveled. I would like, if Brendan has that information to share, I would like to know what that is, because I feel like, again, this brings us back to the fear conversation. And if all of this, if the state has let go of their executive orders, who are we to say we need to keep this longer? I think we're overstepping.
Brenton, I know that there is a question for you. Nikki has her hand up. That could lead to another question for you. So Nikki, go ahead, and then the question that you had, Jennifer, to Brenton. Go ahead, Nikki.
Thank you, Rebecca. I would check Barnesville, Grand Forks, and Glendon. I've been told that those 3 in particular have had smaller group outbreaks, and it has affected many, many kids. So I guess I'm curious. I don't know. So that's my question to Brenton, if he has access to that information.
Brenton, do you have access to some of that information that would help answer the question that's been posed?
Yes, and generally we do not identify school districts, but we have seen outbreaks amongst schools, and that's what I can tell you, just due to FERPA and HIPAA regulations. But we have seen outbreaks amongst area schools. We had a sports team that was recently, or this past year, that multiple cases were amongst the sports team, but we didn't see transmission within the school walls. It was isolated to that sports team. And we've also seen an outbreak in an extracurricular activity at one of our area schools that was isolated to the students participating in that activity, in which we know masking was inconsistent at best.
Thank you, Brenton. Robin?
I want to keep our kids in school.
Me too.
I would like to, I would echo that. We've had a conversation so many times here at the board level about the importance of in-person education. And I'm happy that we are at the point where we have this motion in front of us and that we have the ability to discuss the opportunity to move past where we currently are. And the item that we voted on, item A, is a start to that. I guess it's not moving fast enough for some folks. It's probably not moving fast enough for any of us because I think all of us would like to get back to where we were prior to when this global pandemic hit. So I just want to say that I'm happy to hear from our health officials that they see that it is an opportunity for us to consider June 7th as a time to step away from the plan. I'm happy to hear from administration that you think that that's something that also we could do as a district. So there might have been someone else that had a hand up, Brian, but I wanted to make those points. Brian.
You know, I've watched our superintendent, Dr. Gandhi, since the start of this whole pandemic and that, and I really have appreciated all of your work that you've done to try and keep these kids in school and the plans that was developed amongst all of everybody that you've led. And so to me, looking back from March till now, I'm pleased with where we're at. And so I appreciate all your work.
Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you. I want to go back on something I said, and as I just reflect on the statement, it won't change the intent of the motion at all, but I want to just make something clear as well. I said before that if there's controversial mitigation strategies down the road, that we would bring that to the board. Actually, I'd like to go back on that statement just because administration doesn't know something's controversial until it's controversial sometimes, right? So to protect ourselves down the road, I think the precedence here, I always look at things from an organizational structure perspective. I think the precedence here is that I believe, unless I'm told otherwise by the board, it's my responsibility to follow the local healthcare providers and the recommendations for any partnering agency that we follow. But if we are not to follow one of the recommendations, then the board should tell us that. Just like if the board were saying, you know, the board can take action today to suspend masks, and if that's the case, then that's what we'll do, and that's what we'll move forward. But I think that's a precedent maybe we should create, just so you have a superintendent that's following the partnership, but if the board says, hey, we don't trust that guidance or those recommendations, then the board should give that action, because it probably would be an unfair standard for me to assume what's going to be controversial or not until it is down the road.
So I want to remind us that we have an amendment that we're considering, and I see that the main item that is different from the original motion has to do with the date, because the original motion had June 7th as the date, and then the amendment is, it would be effective immediately. So is there any other discussion on that amendment? Jennifer?
Thank you. So I appreciate the question, Dr. Rupak, but it makes me think about during the implementation of the FPS Smart Restart Plan and the levels of mitigation and in terms of recommendations. And during that time, not all of them were actually adopted or used. If I remember, the scales were modified in terms of the rates of community and the rates of school before any recommendation was modified. So you did have that sort of within your, ability to do so, to not adopt some that were even considered recommendations at the time. And then 2 of the 3 districts that you mentioned, Nikki, were Minnesota. They're still under mask mandates, and they're spiking. What do you mean? What do you mean? I'm sorry, I'm just looking for a clarification.
Nikki, please make sure to use your mic.
But the numbers are up, and they have had to close classrooms even with that. So do we really want to be in a position where we're taking masks off? But outside, I don't have an issue. Inside, I have a concern.
Right. So I'm just trying to process what you're saying, because if we have masks on, we're having a spike, wouldn't that suggest the masks aren't really doing what we think they're doing? There's that. And so unless we have science that can show us like the reason for this disparity, I don't it doesn't make sense to me, that rationale for that reason. And then secondly, I feel like you need to say something before I say my next point. Oh, I thought you were going to, okay. And then in addition, I think, I totally lost my train of thought. Sorry, I thought you were gonna say something. I might need to come back to it.
Jennifer, is it okay if we have Dr. Newman go first and then
Sure,
come back to
yes,
you?
yes,
Okay,
I'm
Dr.
so
Newman
sorry.
and then Rubach.
I was just going to clarify from your first statement about the process of it. That was because we were functioning with the COVID-19 Instructional Plan Committee, and the board had authorized that committee to make decisions on levels. Dr. Gandhi was one of 18 members of that committee, so that's why things were able to change. That committee is now dissolved for the remainder of the school year, so now the onus is on the school board. This is a different situation.
And I guess if I may, my point was that whichever, whether deciding board, whether it was us or the COVID committee, made recommendations that weren't always in line with, and you just said, like, COVID committee had that ability to do so. And so it wasn't just, he was one of 18. To me, I'm just saying it wasn't 100% of what the public health was saying was their recommendation. So it deviated, much like we can. I mean, the executive orders even say that. You can suspend, and there is, again, it goes back, there is no law. So we can say today to end this. And in terms of, oh, I know what it is now. In terms of shutting down classrooms, why would we have to do that? There's nobody dictating that for us anymore. There is no executive order saying you have to shut down and you have to quarantine and you have to, there isn't. That, we're doing that. School districts all across this country, including in this state, have stopped doing that. So just because you get rid of masks doesn't mean you're all of a sudden gonna have to shut down classrooms.
Dr. Gandhi, and then Nikki.
So I think, Jennifer, there's two pieces to your first statement. I think one is that you're probably talking about the thresholds that were adopted by the COVID committee. The COVID committee decided to change the thresholds on those. That was not part of the Smart Restart Plan, nor and Brenton actually was part of the COVID committee as well. So to my knowledge, there wasn't a time where we didn't follow a recommendation from Fargo Cass Public Health. When we changed that, that was with Brenton, and that he was part of that committee. And that's what that's where we followed. Now, there might have been a time where the committee voted to go against something that Brenton recommended. That would have been the board giving that authority. And that's all I'm saying. For us, just what is again, for me, this is just about the organizational structure. Unless, I mean, you guys tell us how you want us to operate. We will follow the recommendations from any partnering agency, whether it's law enforcement, whatever it is, unless the board says, hey, don't follow that recommendation, which you can absolutely do to have that conversation, but there just has to be a standard on how we function.
Okay, so which is not part of this, the discussion regarding this amendment, because the amendment has to do with the date, and Anne Marie, in a minute, I need you to, or please request of you to read again what we're considering, because I feel like it's a little mumbled. Nikki, would you please go ahead?
Sure. I was just going to ask Madam President if we could call the question.
Anne Marie, could you please read the amendment?
Nikki, did you call previous question?
Yes, she did. She called the question, Anne Marie.
We need a second. She's
There
calling
is-
previous question.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Anne Marie, so could you please clarify for all board members exactly what we are voting on?
Right now, you'll be voting on closing discussion on the amendment. So if this passes, then you'll be directly voting on the amendment.
That makes sense. We have decided that we are ready to end discussion on the amendment. And Anne Marie, could you please read the amendment as it exists right now?
Nope, you were calling previous question.
Oh,
You need to
sorry,
vote
sorry.
on
Okay, sorry.
This question.
Yes, go ahead, Anne Marie.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
No.
Benson,
No.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
President Knudsen.
Yes. Now we're back to the amendment, right?
Now you'll be voting on the amendment.
Could you please read the language as the amendment exists, Anne Marie?
The amendment out of the floor is to amend the motion to read, to approve ending the FPS Smart Restart Plan, including mask mandates and quarantine requirements immediately.
Is there any discussion?
We got rid of
There
that.
can't be any
We got rid of
discussion?
that, yeah.
Okay, thank you guys for helping me out here.
Just got
Anne
to-
Marie, you
Yep,
get to
we
call
just
the roll
need to-
then.
Yep. Robin Nelson,
No.
Newman,
No.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
No.
Holden,
No.
Johnson,
No.
Brian Nelson,
No.
Knutson.
No, the amendment fails. We're back to.
You're back to the motion that's on the floor, which is to approve suspending the FPS Smart Restart Plan for the 2021 school year effective June 7th, 2021.
Jim. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second for previous question. Anne Marie, we will take a roll call vote on that.
Thanks for giving me a second just to follow along. Voting to call previous question to end discussion. Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
No.
Benson,
Nope.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
No.
President Knutson.
Yes. Anne Marie, could you please remind us of the tally?
That passes 6-3, so we'll be moving on to voting on the motion on the floor.
Okay, we're back to the motion on the floor, that the board approve suspending the Fargo Public Schools Smart Restart Plan for the 2020-21 school year, effective June 7th, 2021.
Paulson,
No.
Benson,
So I'm going to vote, and then I'm going to make another motion, just so President Knutson knows. So, yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
President Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Anne Marie, I have a question. Are we able to have an additional motion added at this point?
You're still in your business section discussion.
So,
Do you
thank
have something?
President Knutson. Okay, so I move that, hang on, I haven't written this one out, so I'm going to try to give it to Anne Marie slowly as I think it through. I would like to move that we end the requirement for masking and make it a choice, honoring the fact that it is a recommendation by public health, not a mandate, immediately.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
There's a second by David. Anne Marie, when you have it down, could you please repeat it to us?
The motion on the floor would be that the board end the requirement for masking and make it a choice, honoring the fact that it's a recommendation by public health, not a mandate, immediately.
Is there discussion on the motion? Nikki?
So is that saying no masking, period, anywhere, at any time for anybody?
It's a choice. It
Right.
makes it a choice.
Right.
It doesn't
But I mean,
outlaw.
it's taking it away. That,
No, not if you choose.
the requirement
It's taking the requirement.
from everywhere.
Just
We're
like-
not talking recess, we're talking in classrooms, we're talking everything, right? I just want to be sure I understand before I vote.
Right, just like it is now in businesses, it is not, there are no more state mandates. There are no more mandates for masks, so it's honoring that.
Any other questions? Brian?
So we wouldn't be following the Smart Restart Plan? If this was passed?
I don't see that we would be falling in line with that. We would be making some exceptions. We would, if this were to pass, we would say we're making an exception to that plan.
Follow up?
Yes, Brian?
Isn't that circumventing what we just did?
No,
No? What is it then?
ending you're still making it a choice, which you're following guidance, and wasn't that the point of the plan, was to follow guidance, and it's not a mandate. It is a recommendation, and so it is making it a choice, which is actually following the plan.
The Smart Restart Plan requires masks, and it required masks to be worn from the inception of the plan, and when the Board of Education approved the plan, masks were required.
Correct, but that was also part of the executive orders and all of the rules, all of the recommendations included a mandate. They don't anymore. So it is following, it is honoring, and it recognizes within the plan that is going to change as this evolves and we learn more and time goes on. So it's time to make it a choice, just like everywhere else.
Anyone else? Any questions? We're ready to vote? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Benson?
Yes.
Gullickson?
No.
Holden?
No.
Johnson?
No.
Brian Nelson?
No.
Robin Nelson?
No.
Newman?
No.
Paulson?
Yes.
President Knutson?
No, motion fails. All right, we are moving on to item C in our business agenda. Do we need a break? It's 8:15, or are we able to continue through the business? Okay, we'll take a break after we finish business. So we're on to the Board Outside Liaison Assignment Review, Memo 124. I'm just pulling the document up here. 1 second. And the memo comes from me, and we have, as board members, per policy specified in GP 8E, we were to review our outside liaison assignments that we had been appointed to. We do that on an annual basis. And so the reports are attached to the memo. Is there a motion for approval? Jim,
I move we accept the reports as provided.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Jim and a second by Brian to accept the reports as provided. Any questions, any discussion before we vote? I'll note that one of mine I indicated is not an active group anymore because the work is done, and that was for the Core Master Plan Steering Committee. It was a very effective group, but the work of the group is complete, so not necessary anymore. Anne Marie, would you please call the roll?
Gullickson?
Yes.
Holden?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Brian Nelson?
Yes.
Robin Nelson?
Yes.
Newman?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Benson?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes, motion passes. We are going to take a break and get ready for, I believe we're going to have a session after this, so we'll take,
Do you want to
Take the motion
vote? Yeah,
first?
go
Okay.
into, so then we could just.
yes. Is there a motion to address a possible executive session? Jim?
I'd like to move that we go into executive session for the purpose of negotiation strategies as permitted under North Dakota Century Code 44-04-19.1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Seth. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes, so we will take a break for 5-10 minutes, rearrange the room. Board members and administration able to stay in here, but since we're going into executive session, we'll ask everyone else to leave. Thank you so much for joining us. You're welcome to come back if you'd like after we finish. 12 p.m. and we're back into our regular session of the board meeting Tuesday, May 11th. On to board reports. I know there was some discussion about holding off on the board reports at this meeting and moving those to the next one. Is that what the group would wish? Jennifer?
Well, I guess I would just say, can we pause that for a minute? Because we had a lot of constituents here. We've had a lot of communication from constituents. And so I feel like maybe we should, if there's something additional that any of us want to share or that we've heard on that topic, I feel like timeliness is now, I guess.
Is there anything that anyone feels they need to, I'm just going to go around the room quick. I don't mean quickly, but just go around the room. Nikki, anything on that regard? Okay. Brian? Robin had to take off. Jim? Tracy? Seth? David? And Jennifer?
I do, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
So some of the things that, we didn't necessarily have a chance to discuss or ask Brendan, and that have come to us from constituents who have obviously spent a lot of time reading and doing research themselves. I felt like there was a couple of things that I'm still seeking clarification on from those of us sitting around the table too, and trying to understand the rationale for leaving it as a mandate. And from what I've heard from the group, it's that you believe that kiddos, possibly spread the virus and there's not a vaccine yet available to them. And so the reason would be to protect them and others. But that is not something that each one of us are doing in our own personal life. So where there's no mandate, we're allowing our kids to go unmasked. And so I'm having a really hard time understanding the justification in that scenario. And so I want you to please consider that when we're talking about not allowing parents to make the choice, because you have a choice. When your kid goes to baseball, your kid goes to a competition, you have a choice. They don't currently require masks. Are you still masking your child? I feel like if the real reason is that you believe they protect others, then they would be wearing their masks. So so the only answer in my head is that it's about control. And that is not a good reason. Or it's about fear. That is definitely not a good reason. What happened to the science? What happened to there was a time when this all began, we talked about international data. We heard that shared because in other countries, they have the databases and the abilities to follow this, or it was occurring there earlier. I mean, we sit here and a constituent gets up and says to us that, basically we're too dumb to understand the data. I would actually argue that the opposite is true, right? It's cognitive dissonance. Have you ever considered changing your opinion based on new information? No one is citing the data. Everyone is saying, well, we think, we believe, and nobody can show me a spike anywhere that matters. These countries, if you look at current literature out there in terms of the risk, and I don't even think you've denied this, whether or not the increase has gone up or not, but the population with the lowest risk for this illness is children. They are the lowest risk for getting it and the lowest risk for transmitting it. And you can look at databases, over 12 million people in other countries, and see that the kids are not giving it to the adults.
So Jennifer?
I'm just, please.
A couple more minutes, please.
This is what people are sharing with us, and we're not talking about it. We are not pointing to sources. We are making assumptions based on who knows what. Fear? Not everyone in the medical community agrees. That's reality. So why are we allowing, until we have controlled data to say one way or the other, why are we making our kids suffer because of it. They are so they have the lowest risk, but they are the only ones that still have a mandate for masks. So if we're at higher risk, why aren't we mandated out in the public? It doesn't make any sense to me. We are in a position where we had a chance to do the right thing, and we didn't. And I'm just so deeply concerned about the hypocrisy in the messaging.
As I said at the beginning of this meeting, this is something that we know not everyone agrees on.
Right.
And we have voted as a board. We took the business items tonight, and we voted as a board. We made the decisions that we made. There is information, I'm not going to get into a debate on information we're looking at, but we have cited all kinds of information, and we have decided as a board that we are continuing to support the Smart Restart Plan that exists.
Rebecca, it's also our job to represent constituents and
We are.
advocate
We
for
are.
students.
We
And
are.
so I appreciate not being interrupted, because I am here as a voice for them as well, because their time is limited. And we are here as elected officials to represent all of the kids in our school district and all of the families. So I am trying to share with you, because we have received hours and hours worth of emails, and my little 5 minutes is not even coming close to hitting the surface of how important every one of those stories is.
We all have, maybe we haven't all received them, but many of us have. Brian, do you have anything that you would like to add?
I'd just like to follow our policy, and that was at the beginning of this meeting when the constituents spoke and things like that. We weren't to sit and talk about it, and afterwards we were just to hear it. And I don't want to sit and talk about this anymore, or hear about how I voted and why I voted. I'm done.
I have an update that I want folks to know that I did attend the Native American Commission Thursday. At that meeting, we had some discussions regarding the Education Committee and there's some interest in working even more closely with Indian Ed within the Fargo, West Fargo school program. So there'll just be more discussion as that evolves, and probably I've had an initial conversation with Melody. I know Melody Stabner is supervised by Tamara Usselman, and so that conversation will be happening. So the city of Fargo is looking to see and explore where there can be some enhancements and help really regarding Indian Ed. So we will be talking about that down the road. I'm excited to do that and see where that goes. I want to remind everyone that we have our graduation assignments to go to, and that the first graduation is the GED graduation, May 27th. And that's one that Jennifer, you are going to, and the next one is June 4th. Woodrow Wilson, Jim and I will be at that one, and then June 6th, South and Davies and North. So I'm looking forward to those graduations. And the next meeting is May 25th, and we're adjourning. It is 8:20 p.m. 9:20.